Hey, what's happening, guys? It's Josh with Sohn, and I am here to give you my first impressions on the new notation software that I just switched over to called Dorico. It's by Steinberg. If you're no stranger to my YouTube channel, I use a lot of Steinberg products, including Nuendo and Cubase, and so this is actually a pleasant switch because there are a lot of cool features and updates that's happened in this new version. I'm on version 3.5. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a new session that I wrote recently this week. So this is kind of a test run for me to learn the program. I took a lot of notes, made a lot of new shortcuts as the time went on, and I'm pretty happy with the final result. So I'll go ahead and show you the basics and any quirky or limitations about it as well. Dorico has a lot of fundamental differences between Sibelius and Finale. The first thing about it is that they have 5 different modes. So we have the setup mode, which actually gives you all the instruments and voices, and then they also have a layout mode on the right side. They also have this thing called flows, and we'll talk about that more in the engrave. The write mode is where you do all of your writing. So what is different, I like the layout and interface a lot better than Sibelius because everything is actually listed inside the window. So if you're a Mac user, the floating windows in Sibelius is no stranger. Let me show you that. So this is Sibelius, and you'll see that there's a lot of floating windows on everything. You have these things, and you know it's not that bad. It's not the end of the world, but I just like how Dorico has everything all intact inside of each thing, and then so you have the docking windows. These things do go out to the left and so on, and then we go on. Let's do the engrave mode. Engrave mode is basically changing all of the layout, so you have a lot of different options to stretch this and change the way it looks. Going to the next mode is the play mode. And the play mode is really cool because this is pretty powerful in that you can actually edit the notes as you go on. And for instance, if let's say the duration on these notes are too long or too short, let me zoom in here. You can actually mess with the durations. And I can go like this, but it'll keep the notation intact. So it's a very powerful tool. You can mess with different things like the dynamics, key switching, velocity, and the MIDI CC information. Over on the right side of this window, you have your Vst Instruments, just like in Cubase, where you can load up the instruments quickly. And let's see why that didn't pop up. Oh, it's underneath. Okay, so right here then you have all of these instruments loaded up, ready to go. By default they use the Howling Symphonic Orchestra, which isn't a bad sample library for your basic needs. All of these have key switching capabilities, so over here you'll see that there's different articulations that can be played. A list of that will be shown here, and that those key switches are tied into the programming of your write mode. So for instance, if you have an accent in the flute, it'll key switch that over. Down here you'll see the violins have pizzicato, and then over here has arco. So those playing techniques that you program into the score will automatically key switch, and that's very similar to Sibelius, so nothing too different. But what makes it powerful is that you have the option to also make key switching available in a very quick and systematic way. This is a key switch option down here, and you can basically program that into third-party sample libraries as well. So if you have Spitfire samples or East West Orchestra, the Berlin Orchestra, any of those can be used inside of Dorico in a very powerful way. All 64-bit architecture, so it's designed for heavy use of RAM, big orchestral templates. Let's see here. Going on, you have the prints. The print option is really powerful. I think it's actually better than Sibelius's in that there's just a matter of a click of a button to export your tracks. You just have to highlight all of that and export. So it's pretty quick. There's naming options over here, and you can quickly change the file name format, so when you export, it'll just export everything quickly. So that's the basic rundown. Let me give you some details now. So going back to the write mode, you have a lot of ways to write your music. Let me just give you the default way. So I'm going to go into the trombone, and when you press enter, you'll see that this little notation button comes up, and there's a big orange cursor, and then above that, these are your tick marks for where the rhythm starts. So for instance, the big line is 1, the small one is the and, 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if I want to start a note on 1, I'm already there, and I can just use a keyboard, press E on your keyboard. If you have a MIDI controller, you can play the note on your MIDI controller. All right, so then I have E, F, G, A. All right, so that's pretty easy, pretty quick. Now what makes this different fundamentally is that in Sibelius, you have notes and rests you can input right away. In Dorico, it's more about where the note starts, and then the rest will be filled in automatically. So for instance, let's say I want to start on 2 and. So what I did is I clicked on the 8th note and I pressed spacebar 3 times. So now I'm on the 2 and I'm gonna go ahead and press that note. And you'll notice that the rests are already made for you, which is pretty nice. So, and what makes it freeing is that you can just keep going forward and write your notes in without going back too much. The only drawback is if you have ties involved. Ties kind of can mess up the workflow a little bit. So let me show you an example of that. Let's say I want to do a dotted quarter note. And then right here, it'll retain the dotted quarter note until you change the rhythm value. So let's say I wanted this as a half note. Then what I have to do is I have to break it by pressing U or this scissor button. And then go over here, change that to a half note. I just press the number 5 or click on that button. And then you can tie that one back. So there's a little bit of a pit stop that you have to do when you are working with ties or different types of rhythms. Now there's ways to mitigate that. I'm not too familiar, or I haven't really explored these other options, but there are options out there where you can do pitch before duration, and that toggles back and forth if you press the shortcut K. And what this will do is normally you put your note in, or actually sorry, the rhythm in and then the note, and then so if you toggle that over here is now highlighted, you can do the note and then the rhythm. So let's say I wanted a C or C sharp, and then I have let's say I would do a whole note. Okay, so I'm using my keyboard and I just press 6 for that, and all of a sudden the rhythm will be the defining point of when the note is notated inside. It's a quarter note, so D sharp, or actually D. Alright, so I'm just pressing the notes and then the rhythm. And then if you want to change back, you can do that. So I'm not sure how that works with ties, but there's probably ways to kind of toggle back and forth so you can keep moving forward in the score pretty quickly. What other things that I really like with Dorico is the popover function. So they call them popovers because when you press something like Shift D, that has a dynamic popover, and then if I want to add a new dynamic marking, I can just put that in, and it'll go ahead and notate that. So you know, Sibelius actually has something like that in their options. Like if you go to Sibelius and go over a drum set, you can do Control E, and it'll do the same thing. So they also have a pop over function. However, Dorico takes that that approach and really expands on that for other things. For instance, your intervals are different because you have to go Shift I, and let's say I wanted to add a block chord, so I can go 3 3, and all of a sudden now I have a block chord just like that. You can go the other way by going negative 3, oops, negative 3. If I wanted a trill, you just saw that, but I accidentally pressed it. But what was it? It was O. Shift O is for ornaments. So if I want a trill, you can put a trill in there. And of course, when you do a different sound like a trill, it'll trigger that into the key switching. So let's hear how that sounds. All right, cool. What else? I probably should have mentioned this before, but also what makes Dorico a lot different is the fact that you can audition something before you put in notes. So I'm gonna go to just a random spot here. So when you highlight a measure, it turns orange. But then I can, in case I want to experiment with the notes and sketch something out, I can play on my keyboard. Something like that, right? I really like that function because in Sibelius, you can't do that right away. You have to click on it and then press escape, and it'll play. And if I don't do that, let's say I highlighted the box. I love technology. I love technology. Let's see here. That's why. This is why I don't like Sibelius as well, because it has these like weird quirky memory issues if you're loading more than one app during that time. Well, I guess I can't really explain or demonstrate, but my point is if you were to highlight this and then play, it would actually start inputting notes right away, whereas in Dorico, you don't have to do that. You can actually sketch to your heart's desire, and then if you're ready to input, then you press enter, and then this you're actually put into the input mode. Now you can still edit stuff when you're not in the input mode. For instance, you can change the rhythm values, you can make them sharp or flat, all of that stuff. So it doesn't mean when you're not in the input mode you can't change things around. You can still do that. Okay, so I'm going to show you more functions of the popovers real quick, and just kind of give you a rundown. So if I do Shift M, that's the time signature. You can change the meter around. And this is really powerful because if I do this and make them all 3/4, it's going to do all the calculations and do the guesswork for you. So all the future bars will be lined up accordingly. So That's really cool. Sibelius was a little bit lacking in that regard. It wouldn't really convert it very well. Let's try some other things. Shift B is for bars. Now the popover function comes up, and let's say I wanted to delete this bar. I would do -1, and then you'll see this will disappear in a second. All right. If I wanted to add a bar, let's say I want to add 4 bars, I would just go a positive number like this, and it's going to add 4 bars before this one. And it's a little bit slow as it's a bigger score, so it's going to take more time to process all that information. Shift K is for key signature. You can change the key signatures on that. I think the way it works is you would go something like A minor or D major, something like that. And I think I just selected D major on accident, and so it's loading it right now. Okay, and you'll see how that changed over from there. I'm gonna undo that. Moving on, there's a Shift H option. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift. Oh, let me undo that. Okay. I just undid that, and now I'm gonna go to the next. All right. So another option is Shift H. Shift H will pull up any holds or fermatas. So if I want a fermata, you'll notice that it'll add fermatas on all of the lines in the score for that measure. Let's go on. Let's see. You also have things like dynamics. Dynamics, I showed a little bit of how that works, but let's explore that a little further. So let's say I wanted to expand this out and do a 4-bar crescendo. So you can go Shift D, piano, crescendo to forte, and you'll see how that will expand out to the next measure. So the 5th measure over will have that forte. You can also do something like this. Oops. Actually, I'm going to change that over here. So let's say I want to do crescendos. So like, let's say I go crescendo. All right, and then you'll see that you can have that crescendo marking, but then you can also add dots, and also it'll make all those dots for you, stuff like that. Moving on, we have Shift P. Shift P is playing techniques. So the easiest way to demonstrate that is over here. So if I want a pizzicato for the violin, you can put pits over there. If you want to do it for all of the lines together, you can do Shift P again, pits. Or actually, it doesn't do multiple, but I guess you can just copy that over. Yeah, so good old copy and paste. And then fingerings, this is more for piano. So these are all block chords, but yeah, these are all block chords. So if you're writing for the piano only, you can put fingering markings by doing Shift and F, and it'll give you that cool option. Shift I is intervals. I showed you that a little bit, adding intervals above or below the note. Shift C are clefs, so if you wanted to change this to treble clef, I think you just write it in treble, and it'll change that out till the end of the system. By the way, oops, let me undo that. So by the way, if you are wanting to see it visually, there's all of those commands over here, and so the clef function that I just did is somewhere here. Do you guys see it? I don't see. Oh, it's right here. Haha. So um, all of that can be done by a click of a button too. I like shortcuts, you know, especially when you're working really big scores. Shortcuts are a lifesaver. Going over to the next part, I really like this function. It's the lyrics. So let's go back to the beginning. You'll notice I have the lyrics here already, but I'm just gonna delete this real quick. Oh, excuse me, wrong. There we go. So I'm going to type it in and demonstrate how that looks. So I just did Shift L pop over for the lyrics, and I'm gonna write the lyrics in. So first word is gather, so it's 2 syllables. So when you press the hyphen, it'll automatically space it out, just like in Sibelius. Gather around one and all. Alright, so you'll notice here, that is very clean, and I didn't have to press space bar twice for the tied note areas. That's different. Sibelius, you would actually have to press the space bar to skip over that tied note. And the reason why that's the case is because ties are actually one unit. So once you put a tie in, it becomes one note. So that can be good and bad, just depending on how you like to work. But in order to click on the second note of a tie, you have to untie, and then you can actually select the second note. But going back to the lyrics, I digress. The lyrics is something that's very special, because then if you go back to the popover, I can press the down arrow, and then the next lyric or verse will be showing up. And it takes just a second to process all of that. Boom. All right, so all of that's there. Now on top of the lyric function, if you write multiple verses and like a chorus, you can also do that in this way. So let me go ahead and delete that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press the up arrow, and it will change it to a C for chorus. And watch how that works into play. Come and hear what's possible. Okay, so as you'll see, the chorus will actually center vertically the lyrics in between the 2 verses. If you had 3 verses or 4 verses, same thing. What will happen is that that line in the chorus will be centered between the 3 or 4 verses. It does it automatically. It italicizes the chorus, which I think is formatable, so you can change that. You don't have to make it italic through some other options. I'm not sure if that did anything, but you can change that, I'm pretty sure, in one of the engraving options. Okay, so lyrics, that's pretty powerful. Shift O, let's see here. Shift O I showed you last time, but you can do trills that way. Other ornaments are listed in this section, and you can see how you can do different types of trills or mordants or whatever, glissandos, guitar techniques, jazz techniques. A lot of that information is right at your fingertips, and you can. There's a lot of different shortcuts also when you go into the popover. So this is the next one is kind of weird, but it's the Shift R. So what's weird about the Shift R popover though is it also includes this section, which is the tremolos and the rhythm slashes. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in, but that's the only one that I found that was a little odd. So for instance, if I wanted to put like a tremolo marking on violins on this section, you can go ahead and highlight the whole thing and then go here and press that and it'll do the tremolos for you. I'm going to undo that to show you also the popover. So Shift R again, and then if you do 3, it'll give you 3 of those. If you wanted only 2, you can do 2, 2 like that, and that'll be a measured tremolo as opposed to the unmeasured tremolo. There's just a few more. So Shift Q will give you chord features, chord symbols, and as you'll see in the guitars, I don't know what just happened, it disappeared. Whoa, that's strange, it just disappeared on me. So if I go like this, B, enter, boom. Okay, I must have pressed a shortcut to delete that somehow. Maybe I was holding on to Alt during that time. Yeah, so the chord symbols are cool. When you add one chord symbol, it'll do it automatically for the rest of the system. I'm not sure if that's something you can edit out. I do know that it will transpose the chord symbols to a different instrument that's transposing as well. Then you also have tempo, so Shift T will give you a different tempo marking. So if in the middle of the score you want to change that over and do adagio, from that point on it'll slow down to 66 beats per minute. And then the last is Shift A. So if I do Shift A over here, it will actually automatically make a rehearsal mark, and that's actually you can change that as well. So if I go to my layout options and I go to, is it bar number? No, it would be engraving options. So go to engraving options and go to the rehearsal marks and then the sequence type. So if you want letters, you can go back to letters and it'll do a different letter instead. So up to you. If you like working in letters as opposed to bar numbers, you can do that, and this will change over. Yeah, so that sums up the popovers functions that Dorico offers. Moving on, there are a lot of custom key commands that you can also program during this time. I'm going to show you some of the ones that I've used during that time. So as you can see here, if you want to solo an instrument or unsolo, I made a key command for that. The concert pitch view versus transposing pitch view, condensing. So let me show you just a few things that I use so that if you're transitioning from Sibelius to Dorico, it's actually pretty smooth. So for instance, if I want to go to like a rhythm in Sibelius, the rhythms can be toggleable by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So as you see, I just press those buttons and all of those rhythms changed around. In Sibelius 1, or actually let's start at 4. In Sibelius 4 was the quarter note, right? Pretty easy. 5 is half note, 6 is whole note, and then going down, 3 would be 8th note, 2 would be 16th note. In Dorico, it's like flipped. So the higher note, the number you go, the shorter the duration is, and vice versa. So I didn't really like that because I was just used to the Sibelius workflow, and 4 being the quarter note makes sense to me. So I actually was able to switch that around. So you go to the preferences, key commands, and I think it's that. As you'll see, you can change that to the number of your choosing. So I don't think it was 4 last time. I think it was set to like a different number, like 5 or 6. So you can actually customize that to your liking. Let me show you um, the other options. So if you wanted to do concert pitch, you can go to view and go change all of the transposing instruments to a key signature that you're familiar with on all of the lines, and then go back transpose pitch. So this is very similar to Sibelius, so nothing new there. But the next feature is what it makes Dorico so different and so revolutionary. So the condensing feature is why I got this program actually, because you can't really condense in Sibelius like you can do in Dorico. So here's what I mean. As you'll see, it's already condensed. It looks really neat, and it's actually in a different color. So you'll see that it's all black. Now I can't edit the notes here, but if I uncondense, you can. So let me go ahead and uncondense. All right, so now it's gonna mess with the formatting of the score. Everything's kind of shrunken together more, but as you'll see, I have the horn 1 part, horn 2 separated, trumpet 1, trumpet 2, and then if I go ahead and condense again, boop, it takes maybe 10 seconds because it's doing a lot of this processing behind the scenes, but boom, all of a sudden it's all ready to go. Now I don't know how familiar you are with Sibelius, but that was actually the biggest limitation that Sibelius had. So Sibelius is a good program. This is another score here, but as you'll see, I have this combined together, but that's how it's written. So if I were to export the part, I would have to go over here, go to my trumpet, and then I would copy all of this over, and then I'd have to go here to trumpet 1, which I already did the formatting for, but I'm just going to show you just for kicks and giggles. So what you'd have to do is you have to go to trumpet 1 and then trumpet 2 part, and then I'd have to go and I believe go to the filter, which is here, go to the second note, or I think it's the bottom note, bottom note, delete that, and then at the same time I would have to like work on the formatting, because as you see, deleting that second bottom note mess things up a little bit. And then what I have to do from there is just double check everything that didn't actually get all those parts. So I have to go here and select that, delete the second voice. It was a nightmare. I mean, it's not the end of the world, but you'd have to do that twice for each one, and then go to trumpet 2, you know, paste that out. This was already done, but as you'll see, it's just extra work, extra steps that you have to take out of your day to get that score ready. Or so if you're working on deadlines, the condensing feature just makes your life so much easier. And there's, you know, different types of profiles you can do for the condensing. I think that's done with Control-Shift-L. You can go to is it maybe notation? It's a notation option. So over here, if you go to condensing, there are different profiles that you can select from. So there's different ways to condense your music and make them look good. That again is a game changer for me, and is the main reason why I got it. The other reason is the play mode. Okay, so now that you've seen how Dorico works, I'm gonna go over now just the limitations I've noticed and improvements that can be done on on Dorico. There's some quirky things as well. So let's go ahead and look at that. First off, there's a weird thing about Dorico not being able to adjust how rests look. So the rests cannot be adjusted vertically up and down the staff. So I'm sure they have a good reason for that. But in Sibelius, let me go back there. You'll notice that rests can be moved up and down. When I was just writing my notes in practice, it's not a big deal because it looks like Dorico does the best automating of the rests and placing them in the right spots for you. So it kind of takes away the guesswork. So I'm not sure if there is a way to change it, but from what I've noticed, there wasn't a way to adjust that. Anything else that's kind of weird and quirky? In the play mode, your wheel on the mouse works differently. So for instance, if I'm using the wheel and I'm hovering over this side, I can go up and down. But as soon as I hover over to this piano roll, then the wheel will control the left and right position, which makes sense. But you have to be really careful on how you toggle up and down. So if I want to go up and down, you have to do that. If I want to go left and right, you have to do this. And then let's see what else. Oh, if you hold down shift while you're over piano roll, then it'll go vertically. So that's a little quirky, but I mean, I'm sure they have their ways. Okay, so if you want to zoom in, there are two ways to do that in the piano roll. That is, you can press X to zoom out, Z to zoom in, or you can go Control minus and Control plus to zoom in and zoom out, rather than the wheel. And there's probably a way to switch that out in the edit and preferences, but I'm not going to explore that right now. So, but again, that's a little quirky as the default. Ties are a little strange. So if you want to go ahead and break a tie, you have to go U, and that'll break a tie. Now what I mean by that is if I want to press on the second note of the tie, you can't select it because it's tied to the first note and it acts like one unit when you do that. So you always have to go press U or that scissor button, and it'll break the tie, and then that way I can change it to a quarter note and go back and do a tie again. I'm not sure if you can change that option. There's probably a way to mess around with that in the preferences. For instance, there's a pitch and duration option here, and you can put the accidentals, rhythm dots, and articulations after the input instead of before inputting. I'm not sure which one would be better, but you can play around with that. Another thing that was quirky is, let's see. Oh, here's another quirky thing. So I'm going to open up the Vst Instruments so you can see visually what's going on. So what's strange about this is if I'm on the horn section, as you can see here, I'm adjusting this with my MIDI controller. Okay, so one thing that I was having trouble with is sometimes as soon as I clicked out of the measure, it would go back to a setting like this, or maybe halfway, something like this. And so every time I changed it, it would always reset back. The only way to mitigate that or fix that is to go into your note input options. And maybe not there, I think it's in the notation options. Nope. Preferences. Yes. All right, so if you go down to the controllers and you uncheck this box, which I highly recommend doing, go ahead and uncheck it. That way it'll retain where these notes are. So that's a quirky thing. Just make sure to do that if you get Dorico. If you're not, then it's hard to wrap your head around why things don't work the way it should. But a lot of times it's just these different options are selected by default, and you have to uncheck it. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is when you actually save up. So meaning when I save this file, you'll notice that I'm going to minimize this. You'll notice that when you go into the recycling bin, these files that were previously saved is actually going to be deleted. So now all of a sudden I have this file that was previous, and it deletes it. So if you're working on a big session, you'll notice that like maybe 10 to 20 files will be in your recycling bin. That's nothing that affects you, but you know, in a bad way in a sense, but it's kind of quirky. So again, that is my first impression of Dorico. I hope that helps you guys. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. Also, if you like this video, go ahead and press the like button. Subscribe to my channel for more music production and notation software tips. Okay, I'll see you later.